Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third event in the Agronomics Capital Markets Day series. Today, we are joined by the management team at Clean Food Group, the UK-based food business delivering sustainable oils and fat solutions to the world's food and cosmetic manufacturers. For the presentation, the portfolio company's management team will provide in-depth insight into the purpose, market demand, technical milestones today, and growth strategy of the company. I will shortly hand you over to the co-founders, Chris Chuck and Tom Ellen, to run through the presentation. As a reminder, there'll be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If you would like to ask a question, please do so by writing in the Q&A section. I will now hand over to the team to begin the presentation.
Thanks, and hi everyone. Thanks for turning out. We always love to have the opportunity to talk about our company and kind of update everyone on the progress we've made over the last few years. So my name is Professor Chris Chuck, and I'm a Professor of Bioprocess Engineering at the University of Bath. Now, I've been working and investigating oleaginous yeast, developing this technology for about the last 10 years or so. Just over 2 years ago, I met some outstanding entrepreneurs who were fresh off a big exit in the biotech space. And together we co-founded the Clean Food Group to really take all this work, all this research, this exciting opportunity, and get it into the supermarket shelves. So these are Tom Ellen, who is the CFO of CFG, and he's here with me today. You're going to hear from him a bit later. And Alex Neves, the CEO, who couldn't be here, unfortunately. Now, I myself am the CTO, and I head up our R&D programs, as well as the scale-up and manufacturing teams. So when we talk about what we're trying to achieve at the Clean Food Group, and really a lot of the portfolio companies of Agronomics, what we're really talking about is the future of food. What does the future of food actually look like, and how can we be relevant in that in the next decades? Now, obviously, none of us have a crystal ball. None of us can actually say exactly what the future food system will look like. But there are certain factors and trends which are very present today, which are really shaping how the food system will look and how we really have to address some of these challenges moving forward. So a lot of these challenges are actually very contradictory as well. And so we really need to start developing the technologies now to be able to address these. So for example, addressing a global food challenge, climate change, is reducing our ability to effectively grow food and sustain global supply networks. So we're seeing this already with the extremes in temperature, giving us less agricultural land to work with. But at the same time, we have a growing population, which is going to be another 3 billion people in just 25 years or so. So how do we reconcile these two aspects? There's other factors at play as well. For example, there are global mandates across the world now to reduce intensive, non-sustainable farming practices. So where these are stripping nutrients from the land, say in the Amazon to grow cattle, we're trying to reduce these, but these are also very high yielding. So we're actually reducing our ability to do high yield agriculture, but we also have to reconcile this with meeting an increasing global demand for healthy food. So not just creating calories, we're creating a wide range of interesting foods for the global middle class population. And finally, we've all seen what happens with our complex global supply chains. The war in Ukraine, climate change, COVID really hit these supply chains and showed that we really need more increased localized production to lead to food security. But one of the technologies, one of the levers we can use to provide that to local food is being able to process it more. But there is a desire to reduce the amount of ultra processed foods in these areas. So we have to reconcile these two aspects. Now, one of the technologies which can really help address some of these issues is precision fermentation. So fermentation, it's been around for thousands of years. We're very kind of familiar with that. So you give Saccharomyces cerevisiae or yeast sugar, and it produces ethanol. We drink the ethanol, we have a great time. It also, there's a few limited other fermentation products like lactic acid as well, but we've been doing this for many thousands of years, like I said. Precision fermentation, on the other hand, is much, much newer. And this is a technology where you actually grow the cells themselves, which are then harvested for food in bioreactors. And it's really only since World War II, with advances in biochemical engineering and advances in genetic engineering in the last 30 years, which have really been able to make this possible. So good examples of precision fermentation are growing mammalian cells, so cultured meat, for example, or yeast cells or fungi like corn to go into food, or even bacteria as well. So when we look at precision fermentation, we're really looking at a factory, a precision fermentation plant. And one of the first things that people don't often realize is we have to feed these bugs, we have to feed it. And this is the absolute key to the economics of the process and the sustainability. So you've got to choose the right process. Now, first generation technologies tend to use sugarcane, you grow sugar, you feed it sugar. But what we need to move towards is being able to use more available and lower cost feedstocks, things like agricultural residues or organic waste, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So once we feed these to our organism in the factory or in the plant, we can grow our cells, and then we can start using these in food. So we can either grow mammalian cells, for example, and start making burgers, or we can grow things like casein or other dairy products and put that into alternative milks, or we can make oils and fats and use those in the food industry as well. Now, what this really allows us to do is create products anywhere in a local environment without the traditional pinch points of agriculture or animal husbandry as well. So effectively, we can situate the plant right next to the feedstock that we're using. So we cut that supply chain and produce the product for that final market, which is also in the localized area as well. This allows a complete circular and localized solution. So this really allows us to address three key challenges for the food sector. So as I said, economic is for the first one, food security. It enables us to do localized food production. But we can also have other benefits as well. So because we're starting from scratch, because this is a biotech solution, we can actually sidestep some of the issues with using animal fats, with using plants, and build in functionality and health benefits for that same functionality as well. So we can actually start creating slightly novel foods, which allow us to address certain health problems. But probably, and in my opinion, the largest gain we've got here is really environmental. If you do these right, these can be an extremely sustainable alternative to intensive food production. This is so vital going forward in the next decades. So what are the Clean Food Group looking at? So I think we've all heard a lot in the news in the last decade or so, a lot of kind of plant proteins, making plant proteins more palatable, doing vegan and vegetarian food, a lot of kind of research and work and a lot of money being invested into animal proteins, cultured meat and things like that. But when we look at the actual consumption of calories, it's vastly overshadowed protein by fats and by carbohydrates. And really, there's very little disruptive work, there's very little precision fermentation work going on in these spaces. And it really is right for this kind of disruptive technology. So if we take the fats, the oil sector, it's dominated by three main oils. Palm oil, soybean, rapeseed, that makes up about 80% of all the oils. And the total market is massive. It's 300 billion euros or so. So it's a very, very big market and dominated by just a few oils. Now, one of the biggest challenges that the oil sector, the edible oil sector has is actually sustainability. So sure, you're all aware of it's been in the press a lot over the last 10 years around palm oil. It's absolutely right. It is leading to deforestation because it's grown in the tropics. Now, when you grow a hectare of palm, on average, you can get about 3.7 tons of oil a year. Now, one of the kind of bizarre aspects of edible oil production is that's not your major product. The major product is actually CO2. You make 14 tons of CO2 equivalent just to produce 3.7 tons of palm oil. Now, there's some technologies out there where people are saying, oh, we could rework rapeseed oil or sunflower oil into these products. But when you actually dig into it, firstly, palm oil is far more productive. So you need a lot more land and fresh water to be able to grow other oils. But also the carbon emissions are just as bad. Rapeseed oil, 11 tons of CO2 equivalent to produce the same amount of oil as palm oil and 3 hectares of land. Soybean, you need a whopping 7 hectares of land, 7 times the amount of land as you do for palm oil as well, and it produces more carbon emissions. So this says that the issue is not just to try and replace one edible oil or try and curb the growth in the sector, but we have to look at the edible oil sector as a whole and how we find solutions to it. So further issues for the edible oil industry, there's increasing demand. 3 billion extra people need to be fed, and oils are going to be a fundamental part of that. And we just don't have the land, the forest, to be able to do that as well. So we have to be able to produce alternative oils more intensely to meet that demand. At the same time, edible oils, palm oil, for example, is grown in the tropics, cocoa butter in West Africa. There's constricted and complex supply chains, which we're seeing being disrupted. Because of this, there's enormous price volatility. For example, cocoa butter last month went up to $12 a kilo from $4 a kilo, just almost overnight, as crops failed and became much lower intensity because of climate change in Africa. And there's a growing understanding, it's pretty well seen out, that saturated fats are leading to kind of rising obesity, and the environmental aspects as well are absolutely front and center in a lot of people's minds in the developing world. So when we started out the Clean Food Group, we, after talking to a lot of partners, decided that what we needed to do, instead of offering a alternative to one or so of these oils, we decided to become a sustainable oils and fats solutions provider. So ultimately, this is working with the market, working with end users to find out exactly what they need from that oil and fat, how do we produce that from a biotech solution, and therefore have a positive impact economically, but environmentally and socially as well. So how we do this is we've taken a microbe that grows on grapes all across the world. So, excuse me. Now that might sound pretty idyllic, growing kind of in the Roman sunshine, just lounging around eating grapes. But for an organism, for a yeast, it's absolutely hellish, because there's so much competition for that sugar that the microbe has had to evolve dramatically. And over the last 2 million years, this period of evolution has created an organism which is ideal for biotechnology. For example, it has evolved to be able to use any carbon source. So anything that is there, it can use, from C5, C6 sugars to oligosaccharides to protein as well. Because it's quite an intense competitive environment, it's evolved to actively fight off bacteria and molds. And because it's so sugary, because there's so much osmotic pressure, it can grow in ultra-dense cultures as well. So even though the wine yeast Metrocanovia pulcherrima was actually known in the 19th century to produce oil, it doesn't make very much. And so we spent the last 8 years really trying to push this. And we did this through a process called directed evolution to make it make more oil. Now, it's this directed evolution. Now, that's a process where we hold a yeast under increasingly difficult conditions for it to survive. And so it has to evolve in a direction that we want it to survive. And this creates a better organism. And this is what the technology we've used to create our proprietary platform. So the yeast doesn't just make more oil, but it actually grows magnitudes quicker as well. So we've been really driving that forward. Now, Metrocanovia pulcherrima, our wine yeast, already is used in scale processes, but these strains that we've created not only grow faster, actually make oil, but they still use less air to grow than comparable systems as well. So this all creates a viable, proven, scalable system. Because we have the ability to grow on multiple carbon sources, we can access food waste as a feedstock. And by accessing food waste, by being able to feed it on surplus food, we can then really create these sustainable alternatives. So how do we make oil from it? Well, to kind of answer that, I'm going to take a small step back and just look at how we get oil from plants themselves. So the way we get oil from plants is we grow a plant up over many months, and then it makes some small seeds, we harvest those seeds, and we get the oil out. Now, the seeds are not entirely oil. Normally, they have about 20–25% oil. These are sunflower seeds, by the way, some protein, some fiber, some carbohydrates, and a few other things as well. And the way that you can make these cost effectively is you extract the oil, and then you use the rest of the cell for animal feed, for human consumption, to make functional carbohydrates and things like that. And we're doing exactly the same thing. So instead of growing an entire plant over months, we just grow the oil cell over days, hours and days, not months. Now, this oil cell is also packed full of oil, so we can get 40–50% oil and fat with it. But we also have a whole host of other goodies as well, which we can take out and we can gain value from. So, for example, we can make protein, fiber. We have beta-glucan, which is a functional carbohydrate, which we can extract easily from the rest of the cell, and this can go used as a thickener alongside the oil. And we have alternative carbohydrates, emulsifiers like monoproteins and things like that. So how does it stack up from a sustainability point of view? Well, okay, so here's the infographic I showed before. We've got palm oil, 3.7 tons a year, 1 hectare. So if we wanted to produce that, all we would need is a fermenter, 1,500 litres in volume. So that's my height and about 1 metre across. And this could produce 3.7 tonnes a year. And because we're feeding it food waste, because we're running it on green energy, it is a fraction of the carbon emissions associated with zero land use, associated with palm oil, rapeseed, and it also has a very vastly reduced freshwater use as well. So this really does stack up. So the way it works is that we'll take a waste stream, such as bread, it's a good example, and we'll depolymerize that. We'll break that apart, solubilize it so the yeast can use the sugars more effectively, and we'll do that with an enzyme, so a one-step enzymatic process. Once we've got that broth, we feed it to the yeast, and we grow that up to maximum biomass. So we keep feeding it until we're up to maximum biomass. Now, as the yeast grows and grows and grows, it actually makes a big oil droplet inside the cell that you can see there. So it looks a little bit like an egg, with the oil droplet being the yolk inside the cell. Once we're at maximum biomass, we've got maximum amount of oil grown, we break the cell open, releasing the oil, and we can extract that relatively easily from the broth. And this creates a very pure oil because it doesn't have all the contaminants that plant oils have. So it needs minimum refining, and then we have our RBD oil ready to go into products. We also take the rest of the yeast biomass, and we can then get the beta-glucan protein emulsifiers exactly out of the cell debris. So, as I said, it's really important to the economics and the sustainability to choose the right feedstock. So we've looked at multiple feedstocks. We've looked at it all, really, molasses, sugar. We've looked at multiple food waste. We've published all of this in the past. Agricultural residues from sawdust, waste paper, wheat straw, all of these things. We currently actually have a very large government project where we're developing the next generation of feedstocks, and that's to access the billions of tons of grass and silage, which is around, to make sure that we can scale effectively. Now, the current feedstocks we're scaling up with, a glucose syrup is the #1 feedstock available for fermentation. So we're making absolutely sure that there will always be a sugar source for us on the market that we can use. But our go-to-market feedstock is bread waste, and Tom will talk a little bit more about some of the collaborations we have. See that, but we're also working on whey, chocolate, and potato waste with a lot of our partners as well. So this is what we're doing to go through. So here's our oil. We're calling it clean oil. So this is our go-to-market oil, and this has a composition equivalent to a higher lake palm oil. That's the Codex oil that it has. And working with, again, a lot of our partners, we've demonstrated in bakery, in pastries, in biscuit creams. It works specifically well to replace certain fractions of oil in the creams in biscuits. So things like bourbons, Oreos, things like that. We've looked at industrial margarine and being able to produce on that. We've done a lot of work on the cosmetic side as well, where we use it as a base in cosmetics called Ozol. So we did a lot of development with the Hut Group, looking at as a face cream, looking at a body wash. And more recently, very excitingly, we're seeing it as a source of derivatives that palm oil is made into. And we're just working with one of the largest edible oil companies in the world to be able to demonstrate that and demonstrate chemical production from those oils as well. So this is our go-to-market oil. This is what we're really focused on. But we also have a very vibrant R&D program as well to really to make sure we're coming up with not just with these oils, but with the next generation as well. So in our R&D platform, we are working on ultra-healthy oils. So looking at massively crazy oils with a massively reduced saturated fat content. We're looking at oils with increased functionality, so both changing the lipid profile so we can use it as cocoa butter, but also looking at some technologies where we can marry the two together. So we get ultra-healthy oils with increased functionality that you get with solid fats. We're looking at novel nutraceutical oils as well. So we're being able to make omega-7 oils for cosmetic and nutraceutical industries. On the other side, looking at the clean ingredients, we have emulsifiers that we're working on, the monoprotein fractions, functional carbohydrates. We've now got beta-glucan kind of product, which is used as a thickener, which is excellent for gut health, antimicrobial. It's used a lot for that, and bulk proteins as well. Now, all of this work is directly funded through multinational FMCG collaborations, our partners in the Clean Food Group, and some of our corporate investors as well. So these are what some of the oils look like. So there's the pressed RBD purified oil on the left-hand side. And when we're delivering the low saturated oils or the kind of enhanced omega-7 oils, it will be in this type of oil that we can do. We've also looked at different extractions. Because we're a wine yeast, if we use a polar extraction that you can see in the middle picture, with the red oil, not only do we take some of the carotenoids through as well, which give that red colouring, we also take a lot of the smells along as well. So kind of sherry-like smells. It smells like a very complex wine or complex sherry. And we've been playing around with that in the cosmetic industry, where that really does have resonance. Further products from the cell, you can see there, we've got a kind of protidus biomass that we can sell. We've got a purified beta-glucan. We're actually working with a pet food company to look at that as a fortifier in pet foods, to be able to take that umami taste, to take a lot of the protein and those carbohydrates into pet food as well. And finally, in the bottom right, we have a demonstration of what I was talking about some of the technology beyond just changing the oils, but being able to produce very healthy oils with low saturates, adding a small amount of wax and getting it to behave like a solid fat, which is very exciting and gives you the health benefits of a liquid oil for the functionality of a solid fat. So that's a lot of the R&D work that we've got going on, and that's the platform that we're working on. I'm going to hand over to Tom now to kind of take you through how we're getting these things to market. Tom.
Thanks, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. So as we've been building and scaling the technology platform that Chris has just talked you through, we've also been laser focused on ensuring that our technology is cost competitive with the agricultural oils and fats that essentially we're seeking to displace. And I think one of the reasons that as a team we're very confident that this technology can really have an impact in helping to change the food system is because from all the techno-economic work that we've done that's underpinned by the real data that we've got from our scale-up work to date, we know that we can produce a finished product that the industry really wants, that's vastly more sustainable than the agricultural oils and fats that it's replacing, that can be produced locally and from a far more simple supply chain. And we know that we can produce that at scale at a cost that enables us to achieve price parity with those agricultural oils and fats that we're looking to displace. I think the important thing, really, just to set that in context, is just to set out the commercial model that we're looking to build. So we see ourselves as a B2B supplier, supplying food and cosmetics manufacturers with an oil or fat that acts as a functional ingredient in their finished product formulation. And the customers that we're targeting, so those food manufacturers, those cosmetic manufacturers, they do not buy commodity oils. They don't buy commodity palm, for example, or commodity rapeseed. The oils that they buy are quite distant from those commodity oils that Chris started to explain to you a little bit about at the beginning of the presentation. So take palm, crude palm oil comes from the crushed palm fruit of a palm tree that's grown in a plantation in Indonesia, but the oil or fat that a food manufacturer buys is heavily processed. It's refined, fractioned, often blended with other oils to create a functional ingredient in their finished product formulation, an oil and fat that serves a functional purpose in that formulation. And that's the area that we're looking to compete and displace the agricultural alternatives as a functional ingredient to a finished food or cosmetics manufacturer. And our oil can, and we've demonstrated that it acts as a drop-in replacement at that level in the value chain. And that's really important because we're not looking to compete with commodity palm at £1 a kilo, but rather higher up the value chain. Entry-level points into food is £2.50 a kilo, and higher value applications will go up to £10 a kilo. And again, all the techno-economic work that up to date and some of the inherent strengths of the strains that Chris has created over the last 10 years mean that we're very confident that at scale we can achieve price parity and offer the industry something that they really want for the same price as the agricultural alternatives. Moving to the commercial model on the next slide. So the Clean Food Group acquired the technology, the IP that Chris had developed at the University of Bath at the beginning of 2022. That's when the Clean Food Group really came into being, when Alex and myself met Chris, and we agreed with Bath that we would buy that technology platform. We bought all of the background IP and all rights to all foreground IP. The key point there is that, and Chris spoke to it, but the technology platform that Chris had developed was a very robust R&D platform. That was one of the first things that attracted us to it. 8 years of R&D, £5 million of government funding. We were pretty clear that when we bought that IP, we were entering and starting a commercialization project and not an R&D project. We've raised just over £7 million of equity since the point that we in equity funding since the point that we acquired the IP, and that funding has really been directed towards the commercialization of that robust, well-developed R&D platform, and it's been focused on these 3 key areas. Firstly, on scale up. Scale up is clearly a key deliverable for any biotech business looking to bring their product to market. What we're doing here is taking the technology out of the lab at the University of Bath, which is where it was in February 2022, and into an industrial setting. And over the last 12 months and the next 12 months, we're looking to prove really 2 key things. One, that we can replicate our end-to-end manufacturing process at a commercially representative scale, and we can demonstrate that we can get the same result over and over again from that scaled manufacturing process, and we can do so hitting and meeting the key assumptions in our techno-economics that demonstrate that we can achieve our unit cost, and we can achieve what I was talking about before, which is price parity with the agricultural alternatives. That's the first thing with scale up. The second thing with scale up we're looking to do is to build out our design requirements for our end-to-end manufacturing process, because at the end of this 12-month phase that we're in at the moment, we want to build out our own commercial scale facility. And one of the key themes that we're exploring here, which really focuses on one of the inherent strengths in our platform, is the ability, because of the robust nature of the yeast strains that we've got, to repurpose existing fermentation equipment in order to establish commercial scale facilities. So rather than in traditional precision fermentation, where often you're moving towards more pharmaceutical style, building new bioreactors, all our scale up work really is focused on how we can retrofit and repurpose existing fermentation equipment that dramatically reduces capital cost and lead time to achieve commercial scale. The second key pathway is, of course, the regulatory pathway. Now, the largest opportunity for us is in the food industry, and our product, our oil, and the other complementary products that Chris talked to you about will be considered novel foods, and therefore we have to navigate that regulatory pathway. Similarly, in the cosmetics industry, there is albeit abbreviated, but there is a regulatory pathway that we have to navigate, and that's obviously key to be able to bring our products to market. Thankfully, we've got huge experience in the team, having already navigated. Members of our team have already brought novel foods to market in the UK and in Europe. And we're well underway in terms of gathering all the food safety data that you need to get regulatory approval. We expect to have our product approved from a cosmetics perspective by the end of this year. Food is a longer regulatory process, but in the US, Europe, and the UK, we'd expect to be able to bring our product to market in the second half of 2026. The final pillar that we're addressing is commercial collaboration. I think we fundamentally believe that the best way of accelerating and making really efficient bringing our product to market is to leverage the skills and the expertise of industry players to really accelerate our route to market. And I'm going to move to the next slide to talk to you a little bit about our commercial collaborations in some more detail. So again, this is a fundamental for us at this stage in our business, and we're building commercial collaborations all across our value chain. Of course, we have commercial collaborations focused on the finished product, proving functional match and application match of our oils in our target sectors and working with manufacturers and prospective customers. But critically, we're also really focused on our manufacturing and the first half of our value chain. And we believe that by partnering with industry, we can accelerate our route to market and accessing commercial scale. Just to touch on each area, we're working with Roberts, a big UK industrial baker. And we have a collaboration in place with them whereby they're supplying us with bread waste. They produce 7,000 tons of manufactured bread waste every year. And we're using their bread waste at the moment, as Chris showed you in our process, as a low-cost, sustainable way of feeding our yeast to grow our yeast. A key collaboration that we have is with the Döhler Group around the fermentation itself. Now, Döhler are a big German multinational food ingredients business, family-owned, about €3 billion revenue per annum, and fermentation is a key part of their manufacturing process. Döhler invested in us in our seed round, and then also in our most recent round, they invested in us through a services in kind arrangement. And through that services in kind arrangement, we're able to use their people, their plant, and their expertise to help scale our technology. And I'm sure you can see that is a great way of accelerating the scale-up process, low capital deployment from our side, but leveraging lots of experience to demonstrate our ability to scale our technology. Moving further down the value chain, we've got a really important collaboration with Alianza Team. They are a Latin American oils and fat technology solutions provider. And what that means is they take commodity oils and they convert them into functional oils and fats that food manufacturers want for functional reasons in their finished products. And they invested £500,000 in our most recent funding round. And they're helping us with really how we present our oils and fats to market, how we bring out high-value aspects of our oils and fats, and how we present those to deal with functional solutions that food manufacturers require. And then finally, more conventionally, we've got a huge roster of collaborations at finished product application, covering the sectors that Chris took you through in food, in cosmetics, and in pet food. But at the first stage, this is about sharing samples of our oil and establishing application and functionality matches in their finished products, replacing agricultural oils and blends that they're using today. And we've established matches across a huge number of sectors in food, cosmetics, and pet food. And ultimately, this is about driving towards commercial supply arrangements. Marks and Spencer's and the Hut Group are two public collaborations that we've announced, but there is a roster of 20 big multinational manufacturers that sit behind that. Just to touch on scale up now in the next slide, and to set out the traction that we've had. Scale up's a key pillar for us. And 2022, we were in a lab, a little pilot plant at the University of Bath, fermenting in a 70,000 litre vessel, which is about the size of a big fridge. In 2023, with the help of Döhler, we moved across to a 1,000 litre fermenter, which is the vessel you can see behind those three people, one of whom is Chris on the right-hand side. But we've been running fermentations at 10 times the scale that we had at Bath at 1,000 litres. And then in 2024, we've now moved into a fully industrial setting. We're at Beversol, which is a alcoholic fermentation facility in Herefordshire, in the UK, in cider country. And this is really interesting and talks to what I was speaking about earlier in my presentation about our ability to repurpose existing fermentation vessels for our needs. That we're using a 6,000 litre vessel. It's the one on the left-hand side of the photo on the right-hand side of the screen. And that actually is a seed fermenter for an alcoholic fermentation train. We spent about £50,000 repurposing that for our requirements, and we're now running not only at significantly more scale than we were 2 years ago, but in essentially what is a very standard fermentation vessel. So really exciting progress that we've already made. Finally, just to touch on the team that we're building, because clearly an important use of the money that we've raised is to build out a team that can really take this technology platform to the next level. the three co-founders on the left-hand side of your screen. Alex Neves is the CEO. He has 15 years of experience building businesses in the food industry. He left university and started a food business from scratch. That food business is still going today. Alex exited about 5 years ago, but that was basically focused around ready meals for supermarket brands and supermarket chains, and it's still today supplying some of the leading UK supermarkets. So he has a huge knowledge and understanding of the food industry, but also he has successfully navigated those novel food pathways. He's brought novel foods to market in the UK and in Europe, so understands very well that regulatory pathway, which is critical. Chris, you've met. Myself, my background, I had 20 years of big corporate experience in KPMG and then in Royal Dutch Shell. Last 5 years I've spent in startups. I co-founded a startup focused on the cannabis space when regulations were changing in 2018. We raised £50 million privately over 18 months, built the biggest vertically integrated cannabis business in Europe, which had 300 people at the point that it was sold to a big US cannabis company. So lots of experience in funding and scaling startups. Andrea Cataruzza is our Director of Food Science. He was previously Director of Food Science at Mars Global Confectionery, is a world leader in oils and fats and the way in which oils and fats interact in chocolate and confectionery. Obviously brings huge experience and gravitas to our commercial collaboration and finished product application. To the right, Dr. James Mercer, who's our Head of Manufacturing and responsible really for our scale-up program. He's worked for 20 years in some of the biggest fermentation businesses in the world. Most recently, he was head of bioprocess engineering at Quorn, but has huge expertise in scaling fermentation processes. And finally, to the right, Hannah Dubeck, who's our CMO. She has, again, more than 20 years of experience in high growth tech, comms and marketing roles in Silicon Valley and in Europe. So I think, we've really focused on building a very experienced senior leadership team. We're a team of just over 15 people, but we've combined that entrepreneurial flair with a deep sector experience because we feel it's really important that we have the team that can take this technology platform to the next level and really start to shape the future of food. And on that note, Chris, I'll hand over to you to close out our presentation.
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, just to kind of close out, I suppose, while we can't say what the future of food is going to look like, we do get asked a lot about how all of these technologies will fit in together. And I suppose kind of thinking it through, what do we think the future of food actually looks like? Well, to the consumer at least, it looks something like this. It shouldn't look particularly different to how it looks today until you look underneath the hood. And that's where we start thinking about perhaps these burger patties being made from yeast cells, proteins, umami taste, all from that with probiotic activity. The bread is a zero waste factories. We're using the offcuts to produce microbial oils. The potatoes, grown locally, can be fried and recycled microbial oils. Sauces created with thickeners, vitamins, colors, all from our microbe or a different microbe with reduced labeling. So these are the kind of technologies that can be brought through by being able to harness like the power of microbes and yeast as well. So yeah, I think it's just left for us to say thank you so much for listening to us go on. And yeah, we're starting to kind of receive your questions, which we will handle now. So thank you. Okay, Tom, I think the first question I'm probably going to throw your way, seeing as I get to compare this. But yeah, someone wants to know about the kind of key markets that we're going to focus on entering first. Where are we seeing market entry first?
So I think, that market entry is, I've explained that there's a regulatory pathway that we have to navigate to bring our products to market. And so to an extent that dictates the markets that we're focusing on. We haven't got the bandwidth to deal with regulatory approvals throughout the world. So our initial focus is, from a regulatory perspective, on the UK, on Europe and the US. We're a UK business, so the UK makes sense to be our core market. But I think a really important point is that we want to be and we will be a global business. And we're already building relationships with partners and collaborators in different geographies. We want to serve multinational food and cosmetics manufacturers. And to do that, we have to be a global business. So the relationship we have, for example, with Alianza team will also be focused on how we start to think about licensing our technology to support manufacturing around the world. And I think one of the good things about the IP platform that we have built and we are building is that it will lend itself to a license model. We use fairly standard manufacturing processes. A lot of the value is in those strains that Chris has created. And so licensing ultimately will be the way in which we expand and become a truly global player.
So thanks, Tom. I'll give you a break and I'll handle the next one, which is around competitors. So yeah, we have a number of competitors. There's a couple of companies in the States who got who are a few years older than us, working in this yeast oil space. One of the companies uses a GMO organism and is really focused on liquid oils for frying and see if they can recycle indefinitely, looking at soybean kind of replacement. And then we have C16, who again making a liquid oil from New York, and they are scaling to the 50,000 litre scale as well. So there's a number of startups who are probably not as far along as us. Probably the most notable is a company called No Palm in the Netherlands, who are very, very focused on being a B2C or really focused on that palm oil and trying to replace raw palm oil. So where we really see a competitive advantage is in the organism itself, where C16 and Zero Acre Farms are basically just using a standard organism from a cell bank. There's nothing particularly special about the organism. We really set out to try and work out what the issues were with biotech. You know, this stuff has been known for 150 years. Why are we not using yeast oils now, microbial oils now? And so we really invested in looking at robust organisms that can grow in very low oxygen environments for an oleaginous yeast. And that allows us to do the retrofit, which allows us to reduce CapEx, but also allows us to be able to scale up very quickly. So once we have the proven concept on a certain scale, it's very easy then to kind of go sideways and be able to retrofit plants quickly and rapidly kind of move out there. And it's really the kind of uniqueness of the organism which allows us to do that. Now, as we've been on this journey with our R&D program, another brilliant thing we have with our organism and some of the technologies we've been developing is we have the actual ability to change the fatty acid profile. What that means is we can change the functionality of the lipid while we do the fermentation. So really, it's not using different strains. It's just the way that we do the fermentation allows us direct towards other values. So it gives us a much more flexible platform to hit functionality, what our partners need, and we can basically adapt to the market as we go, effectively producing the highest value oil for what we need to at any time. And I think this is really borne out by just the amount of partners we now have at every stage of the value chain, but specifically in the fermentation space. We're being invested in, we're being worked with, we're being invested in R&D as well as in kind of equity. You know, with partners who believe in this, who've seen the space and are invested in this kind of flexible platform rather than, say, a fixed strain, which does one thing. And finally, I would say as well, we're really developing, which is beyond other people, is the use of the rest of the cell and really understanding that we are replacing an oil seed. We're not replacing a oil. And so we have to be able to get that value in both of those sides. So I think all of those are part of our parity. Okay, Tom, I'm going to throw one out to you now. Okay, so what are your thoughts on the perception of plant-based meat and the decline in market value recently translating to the world of precision fermentation-based foods? What is the plan to change the perception of consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can probably answer that question by flipping it around a little bit and again talking to two of the key areas that we see as the strength in our platform. That probably are perceived as key barriers in some of those industries. And that's the time and cost to get to commercial scale, which is, it is a challenge and a barrier for precision fermentation, especially where you have to build new. And again, that's why we're so excited about the platform that we have, because we're getting fantastic results from basically light retrofit of existing fermentation vessels. But clearly a key challenge is, how do you build out the scale quick enough to meet the demand of food businesses? And I think building new is a challenge. Being able to repurpose existing, and there's plenty of existing fermentation capacity, that dramatically reduces that challenge. And second is clearly regulatory. We have to navigate those regulatory pathways. Those regulatory pathways are different in every market, and that's why that is front of mind for us, in terms of our ability to bring a product to market, is getting ahead of the key challenges that are involved in gathering all the food safety data that you need to satisfy a regulator that you can bring a product to market. I think those are the challenges that investors are seeing. That means there's a long capital and a long lead time to bring products to market. And that's why we're very focused on those two areas.
Great, thanks, Tom. Okay, I'm going to wrap two of these questions together. So we're being asked whether we're revenue generating, and also when we expect to reach price parity with current oils like palm. So a quick one to that is to say we're not revenue generating yet. We're still scaling up the technology, and hope to have a limited launch by next year in cosmetics.
Yeah.
And in terms of price parity with palm, I don't expect any of these microbial oils, no matter the scale, to be able to get to the kind of historical price of raw palm oil. That's not what we're talking about here. But effectively, most of the world doesn't see that low price of palm, the kind of $1 a kilo. What we're competing with is the refined oils and oil fractions, which have already been processed to give a oil and fat solution. And that's what we're really competing with. And then you're in the price of the kind of $2 to $5 a kilo. And we believe we can hit that price relatively comfortably in what would be a mid-size fermentation facility. So you're talking about 1 million litres plus fermentation capacity. Great. How satisfied are you with the quality of the oil produced by the bioreactors, the retrofitted bioreactors? Any degradation compared to smaller facilities? Actually, no. We have been looking at oils in many, many different ways and forms. It's very, very stable, it being able to be produced. Some of the impacts on the oil, one of the fears we had originally was that actually when you change feedstock source, that could have a big change on the oil. And now we basically have parameters we have to make sure that we hit, so a carbon to nitrogen ratio in a certain range, to make sure that we're still producing the amount of oil. But in terms of quality, we're not seeing a reduction in quality when we go to these retrofitted systems. I mean, your biggest worry with a retrofitted system is, can you put enough oxygen in? So really that's down to clever retrofitted design. And what about contamination as well? So those are your two kind of worries. In terms of quality of the oil, we're not seeing a reduction in that. Okay, maybe Tom, one for you because it's got economics in the title.
Yeah.
Would your economical benefits based on population growth still hold if world population goes down to 5 or 6 billion? I
think the quick answer is yes, and the sort of longer answer is a lot. I mean, a lot of the oils that we're looking to replace, they're sourced or they come from tropical vegetable oils that can only really be grown in quite a constricted part of the world, a small kind of corridor north-south of the equator. You know, palm oil, for example, comes pretty much exclusively from Malaysia, Indonesia, and you know the sort of the intro that you saw the presentation was the world's population is expanding, but the land available to supply that from an oils and fats perspective is geographically constricted. But I mean that's not the key kind of economic rationale for our business. You know, fundamentally, from all the work that we've done, we believe that we can achieve price parity with existing agricultural oils. We can be cost competitive with those oils, and we're still providing a more sustainable, more local, simpler supply chain. So quite apart from the demand profile, we're offering a better product at the same price. So yes.
Fantastic. And I don't think we are going to see that population change until the 22nd century anyway. But we also, I think, have to say there is an expanding desire for functionality in the middle classes as well. So even if we did manage to get population under control, then it's about being able to provide calorific, nutritious diets, which again, these precision fermentation oils come into their own.
Thank you,
Great.
Chris. Thank you, Tom. I'm afraid we're out of time. So thank you everyone for your questions. If you have any further questions, please do email over to Set Newgate and we'll pass them on to Chris and Tom to respond in writing. Chris, Tom, I'll leave you with any final thoughts before ending the session. Thank you again.
No, just thanks for everyone for tuning in. It's been Tom and I being able to kind of present the company to everyone and get a bit of interest.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.